Hello, everyone. Dr. Judy here, Dr. Judy, WTF, and I've missed everyone. I haven't been live for a while, and I'm so glad to be back in studio. And this is a show on apathy, so I hope that not too many of you are apathetic and not really wanting to hear the show. So I'm going to relate apathy to narcissism because, as many of you know, I've done a lot of YouTube videos on narcissism, and I'm coming out with a video called Healing from Narcissistic Abuse, which hopefully will be canned and ready to go in about 3 months. This is a call-in show, everyone, so I welcome you to please call in and at the very least ask questions in the chat room. But I love call-ins more than questions in the chat room. So just a little bit about me and what I'm going to be doing tonight, which is my usual way of looking through the lens of the mind map. And just for your clarification, if you would be so kind as to put the mind map up there. Thank you. Okay, so the mind map is a pathway to healing. And in this case, we're going to be discussing wounds of childhood related to apathy and how that is a symptom of narcissism, and how apathetic consciousness creates reactions and negative core beliefs and a bunch of chaos and defenses and breakdowns and repetitive patterns and thank you. All kinds of pain and not much synergy and healing. So to get right into it, panel 1, wounds of childhood. There are many wounds of childhood, specifically verbal abuse, which I discussed in another show, sexual abuse, control smothering, physical abuse. And tonight we're going to talk about apathy because of all the abuses, the one that really speaks to I don't care about you and you don't matter, and to the point where maybe you aren't even worthy enough to be on the planet. These are some of the core beliefs that I hear in treatment. We're going to look deep into this and see what this huge disconnect is all about. How does it form? Starting with the parents and the infant, mother-infant disconnect, father-infant disconnect, and then how it reverberates. So a lot of you who are tuning in, I am sure, have been in relationships that have been at best empathetic on some levels, hopefully, and at worst very apathetic and uncaring, disconnected, symptoms that show up in the form of really, I don't care about you, and talk to the hand. I'm not really interested in what you have to say. And so these kinds of responses to a human being are the most damaging. So let's start with mother, infant, disconnect, and apathy. How does that show up? So in an ideal situation, sorry, I'm already losing my voice. That's what I get for talking all day and being a psychologist and having a profession that demands that I talk a lot. So starting with mother-infant disconnect, how does a mother show apathy to the baby? Well, there are plenty of ways. And to begin with, let's talk about what parents do to make it right, to connect with their babies, and then we could talk about the opposite. So human connection is about bonding. It's about attunement. It's about eye contact, breastfeeding, skin-to-skin contact. It's about putting your child's needs before your own. Apathy is when you just don't have that connection, either because your mother or your father didn't have that connection to you, or that you've been hurt to the point where you've put up a wall and you've done the apathetic defense mechanism of not caring yourself. And so let's take a look at the effects of this kind of a disconnect on the human psyche. So again, panel one, there are all kinds of ways to show apathy: hitting a child, verbally abusing the child. I mean, these are different types of abuses, but the worst offender, in my opinion, is when a parent simply doesn't care. And that can show up by being emotionally unavailable. It can show up by being physically unavailable. It can show up by being emotionally and physically unavailable. So to get to the worst types of human disconnect, we're talking about parent, for example, who just doesn't want to attend to the baby. There's a failure to really have an interest in the baby. They may hand the baby off to a caretaker, a grandparent, the other parent. They may just not really want to bother with the care of their baby, both physical and emotional. And of course, even though the baby is pre-verbal, meaning they cannot talk, they're still getting the messages and they're still absorbing the consciousness of the mother. And this absorbing then will create reactions in the baby that then reflect what the amygdala, or the emotional brain, is doing with it. And if there's just not enough care there, then imagine putting the baby on emotional extinction. So when we extinguish emotions, what happens is typically the baby will start by rebelling and crying and acting out. And then if those signs of distress are ignored, then what will happen is slowly the baby will start to shut down and they will stop engaging. This is very sad. You can actually see the baby in severe cases curl up into a little ball and turn inward and become quiet and quite submissive. And it's really hard to get that baby out of this hole in the soul, as I refer to it. And so if you are wanting to be a parent, obviously study attachment theory. If you have issues of attaching to another human being, then the most worthy thing you can do is get help for yourself so that you can become emotionally available to yourself, to your significant other, to your child or future children, and then create an atmosphere of welcoming, create an atmosphere of a child who will feel meaningful in the family. And this is a call-in show, everybody, and please do call in because I'm live now and I can answer questions. And I'd certainly like to hear from you and your experience with apathy. And at the very least, chat away in the chat room. And if you have questions there, ask away. I'll try to attend to that. So what happens to that amygdala is it starts to shut down. There is fight, there's flight, there's freeze, and there's fawn. And so the disconnect is when the baby just sort of fawns and doesn't really exhibit too many emotional reactions again. Why? Because they are being slowly extinguished. And the baby might turn inward, but there's not much inner comfort in a little infant because they have not been yet developed to have these emotional goodies, so to speak, within themselves, to soothe themselves, to know that they're worthy, to understand that they do matter, that they are lovable, because children will define themselves in the eyes of their parents. And so if you look into the proverbial eyes of your mother or your father or your primary caregiver and there is no one home, that's a scary place to be. Okay? And then when you turn inward and there's not much there to comfort you, then you are now in what I call the double dungeon of darkness, because you've got nobody to turn to. Very, very, very lonely, very hopeless, a place that no one wants to be. The problem is that as children develop, they then develop core beliefs about themselves and the world. And this is where cognition comes online. This is where cognition plays a role in the development of the thoughts that are formed around this particular disconnect. And now these thoughts come into play and conclusions are made. And this is where these negative core beliefs, I'm on panel 3 right now, by the way, for those of you who like to follow the mind map. You can see that panel 3 is a DNA strand. So if mother and father are both unavailable, then the bond that the child has is not much of one to either parent, and they're just sort of lost in a haze of forlorn confusion. They're just kind of wandering around and aimlessly undefined, and they don't really have a chance to get that support that evolves them up the developmental ladder. Panel 3 is also a metaphor for core beliefs that then ingrain into the fiber of the child's being. Core beliefs that I've mentioned before. I'm not good enough. I'm worthless. I don't matter. I am not even worthy enough to be on the planet. I shouldn't have been born. This is very sad when a human being gets to that point where they deeply believe that about themselves. And then when they do, of course, they set themselves up to prove that they're right. And this is not always as conscious as you might think. These are unconscious ways that they now see the world. I call it the cracked lens of perception. So they're seeing the world, themselves and other people, as parental eyes upon them. So if mom and dad were rejecting, then they're looking and staring into the void of rejecting eyes of others, and they'll choose relationships that will reflect their core beliefs. So the next thing you know, they're doing what I refer to as a WTF, a what the Freud, where they keep spinning around in relationship to relationship where the apathy is showing up. So they might pick a partner who then doesn't particularly possess empathic qualities, and they will toxically bond to this partner. And by toxically bond, I mean that it's a bad deal. It's a bad deal because they're bonded and usually the partner's not bonded. And I think we have a call. And hi, thank you so much for calling in, and welcome to Dr. Judy WTF. How can I attend to whatever's on your mind?
Hi, Dr. Judy. I'm calling in regards to the topic tonight, and I have a specific question regarding apathy and narcissistic abuse.
Great. That is the topic we're on. And a name, please, so that I can call you by name.
Yes, you could call me Bob.
Okay, Bob. Thank you so much for calling in. So how do you relate to the word apathy, narcissism, this horrible form of human disconnect?
Well, narcissism is not having the ability to love and self-reflect and self-correct. I've called your show before. I've had two parents that one is now dead. One died a couple months ago.
Yes.
And I've been faced with the knowledge, and it's been pretty much in my face of just through all my studying and my work, is besides grieving the parent you never had,
Yeah.
which was already done. So when my narcissistic father died, it wasn't that much of a loss. But how does a person pretty much accept, embrace the knowledge that the first two persons in their lives, mother and father, never truly loved them? How do you make not so much peace with that, but how do you take that and move forward into the world as a young adult, even though
Yes.
It's at times it's heartbreaking, at times it's an emptiness, at times the knowledge is, you're grateful to have that knowledge, but knowing that the first two persons never loved you. How do you go forward with that with other people, with other relationships?
Right. Okay, so you're asking the basic question of how can you trust other people when your primary people never showed you unconditional love? You know, how's that supposed to happen? So I could talk to you logically, but then again, there's a thing called psychologic, which is the logic of the psyche, which takes over, and it's a hard compete with logic. So if I said to you, Bob, logically they were injured, you understand this, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Logically, they did not develop the psychological nerve endings, if you will, for love and connection. Logically, you understand that, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I do. Yes,
but it doesn't help to know when you're small or even when you're an adult that you weren't loved. So where do you turn? You turn to personalizing it against yourself. So again, I bring up Alice Miller a lot because I think she had such a great point, which is that children will say things like, I'm the one at fault. It's my fault. I'm unlovable. I'm worthless. I'm not good enough. And then they'll explain it away and they'll elaborate by saying, I'm worthless, unlovable, not good enough because I'm fat and ugly and stupid. And they keep embellishing it because no child wants to lose the idealistic version of a parent. So they would rather blame themselves. So just follow me logically. And then I'm thinking that after a while, your psychologic and your logic can align. So what you're faced with now is a world of, who are these people? Are they like my mother? Are they like my father? So logically, is everyone incapable of love? Is everyone apathetic? Is everyone narcissistic? So you tell me.
Well, I mean, when you're aware that the first two people who gave birth to you, and then even though in death you're even more confronted that they never loved you, it kind of puts this dark shadow into the world. With all of your knowledge, it makes you feel kind of I believe that, you know, when I was doing the mind map, one of my negative core beliefs was that I never should have been born.
That's
and
about as rough as it gets. So
specifically,
Robert, I just Bob, I want to answer this in a way where maybe you can wrap your head around it, and let's start logical. I know I have another call, but I do want to really attend to this important question. So logically,
please, thank you.
Okay, logically, we know that not everyone is your mother or like your father, but they did scar you in breaking trust. Okay, so what do we do with that is we project it on other people. So we think the next person coming down the pike is also incapable of love. And what do? We shut down, we withdraw ourselves, and then we make it so. And so I want to challenge you, and I know we'll speak again, I want to challenge you with this distinction that not everyone is your mother, not everyone is your father, and you made an error that every child makes, which is to think that there's something wrong with you rather than something wrong with their capacity. Okay, so just wrap your head around that, and we'll talk about that. And thank you for calling in, and I'll take another caller, and I want to hear from you about that. Okay. So thank you, Bob.
Thank you for taking my question.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
Enjoy the rest of your night. This was a very important question to me that I'm trying to just wrap my head around.
Yeah, just
so
wrap
I appreciate
your
it
head
very
around
much.
that one. Okay. Okay. Good night.
Thank
Good night,
you.
Bob.
Good night.
Okay, and I know we have another caller. Thank you for hanging in there. And yes, hi.
Hi.
Hi, and give me a name I can call you by, please.
Barry.
Barry?
Like in strawberry. Yeah, as in strawberry.
Oh, Barry.
Blueberry,
Okay. Hey,
etc.
nice to meet you. Thank you for calling in. And how do you relate to apathy, narcissism, and maybe what the Freuds in your life that you've now repeated to prove the point?
Yeah, so this is a great topic, and it's this hole inside is perpetual.
Yes.
You're growing up, entering the world through this system, and being programmed and socialized in it, and having the confusion that results from, I find the labels that we use, mother, father, love, all of these things that are supposed to be, and then we end up in the state where we are staring and we're living in an experience where we don't find any of the experiences that are supposed to be related with these terms, and it gets a lot of confusion yielded inside of me.
You know, that's a great point, and I'm thinking now about archetypes. Carl Jung talked about the mother archetype, the female archetype, the male archetype, the father. You know, we have all these images of who and what a mother or father should be, what qualities those come with. And then, of course, there's advertisement and movies and, you know, and the Brady Bunch and the white picket fence families. And then we look at our own families and think, what the Freud is going on here? Okay. And then again, what the real problem is that we turn it back upon ourselves. So there's no kid that I know of who says, you know, there's something really wrong with my mother. Maybe later they will, after some psychoeducation they might, but rarely will a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old child say, my mother's off, you know, there's this a problem with mommy dearest or daddy dearest. They'll usually say, you know, my mom doesn't love me. Really? She doesn't love you? What's the problem? I know why she doesn't love me. Because I failed my math test. That's why she... So can you see how children will pull in explanations to justify why this is going on? That's the real problem.
Well, right. When we're in a confused state, we're looking for answers, seeking something, some clarity, some order to the chaos that's in front of us that doesn't make sense. And
doesn't make sense.
Not only those stories, but it's perpetuated when you leave your household and you go to school, for example, and you see the mother doing the mother things that are associated with that label. Mm-hmm. And so you return to your own world and it's not there. And so it becomes even more confusing because not only is it in the stories that we're told and we follow, like Cinderella and Leave It to Beaver and the Brady Bunch, as you mentioned, these things, but when we leave our house and actually enter the world with other human beings, we see other children receiving that. And often for me, what happened is in public, my mother would switch to become, and it was like I was in that experience of her being and giving me those things, the love, the praise.
I'm
attention,
hearing you.
Right? But then I returned to my own world and when we're in the house, it becomes a totally different animal. The beast comes
Right.
out. It's like the veil, the presentation to the outside world is not necessary once you're inside the home.
And that
makes, I find the home feels unsafe, and that adds to the whole thing, of feeling unsafe and empty within yourself. Also, the home, the concept of the word home, becomes foreign as well. Nothing feels safe, right?
Right.
So,
right. And so, and
anyway, yeah.
No, I was going to say, and your
My question is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, your previous caller asked. I had two things I wanted to ask. One ask and one offer. So
Sure.
my offer is your previous caller who asked, how do you make peace with the fact that you were born into a world with two parents? Mine, for example, my biological father left and had no contact after I was like maybe 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm,
and a mother who repeatedly married she had no interest in the children, but her career, and kudos to her in the feminist movement. She was in that era. But husbands were babysitters, right?
Yeah.
So as long as she could tick the boxes and say she had a husband at home, then she felt fine not being there.
Yeah.
And so the way that I found to make peace with this was I have to turn the lesson, the gift, the challenge to me that I came into a world and I entered a family that had this system already in place generations past.
Right.
That actually is a challenge to my soul in a way to experience it and be different within the environment and find a way to love them or be okay, fill my own hole inside my own soul, right? That was the it's almost like I had to find a way to accept that I didn't have children because I was fearful that I would pass on. I couldn't be a good parent. I didn't want to do to a child what it had been done to me, and I didn't think I had the skill set. So I said no. So I lost that chance of connection. But it was later on that I found that I had to find a way to accept that it's almost like I'm the scapegoat role, I think, in a way, ends up being the role that's a challenge to the system.
So what I'm hearing is you stepped out of the system, and rather than being sucked in and then buying into all of these, you're able to say, wait a minute, I'm a distinct human being. I do have feelings. I don't want to lose the very these human qualities that make me human. So let me see how I can be human in the face of inhumane. Something like that?
Something like that. But yeah, it took me until my 50s. And I went through crisis after crisis, mental illness, disability, all of it. It took me down. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's almost like you have to hit the floor with this to begin to be willing to I'm flawed now as a person in a way because I carry all this forward, and the only reason I'm carrying it forward is because they were in systems just like the one I'm in. And so how can I fault them? Because I ended up very similar, and I had to fight really hard. I have a gift. I consider it a gift that I got mentally ill because that gave me a route to start examining things and pull me out of the system and made me look at it, right? So I can't blame them for being just like I am, because I have to look at what happened. And when I learned what happened generationally, that helped as well. When I learned what had happened to my mother, for example, it made total sense that she had no ability to give to anybody because of how she was dismissed and there was apathy about her from the family.
Right. So you're able to have compassion for the injury that created this disconnect, is what you're saying. Yes, that you can.
Well, I had to acknowledge in myself that I have the same trait.
Yes, and that
you're not angry
different.
At myself.
Yes. Right, because
right? I am like them, and I have a choice to make it different. That's the gift, is when what you're offering and what I did years of dialectical behavior therapy, and that really helped as well. It's almost like you have to reprogram yourself to accept what was and where you are. I know I'm getting really kind of big topic here, but
no, I think you're right. It does take
we're all products of the system.
A paradigm shift, you know, sometimes a philosophical paradigm shift, and you know how you alluded to your mental unhealth as in a sense a curse by design that made you wonder and figure it out and go deeper into things. And sometimes that's what happens. I mean, certainly, right? We know that when we, you know, that when we're passionate about trying to figure something out, after an event, after a trauma, after a disconnect, we become wiser, and we become able to see more and teach more. And so I think that seems to be your pathway, is that it made you think, it made you see, it stimulated your own compassion for where this injury came from. And so it sounds like you're on a good path with this.
Well, yeah, it takes a lot of work, and I think being able to observe your family unit and acknowledge what I can see is I can see the other members that didn't get help, that didn't lose their minds, that didn't have mental illness or acknowledge that they did. Okay. I observed the system from a little bit outside, being removed from it, and I'm thankful, because I would hate to be like one of my relatives that is so much needs to control everything. There's labels on everything in the household and controlled amounts, and like I can appreciate, thank goodness I'm not like that. And yes, I had this harder, different route to take, but had I not had the gift of having the pain and reacting to the experience like this isn't okay, I wouldn't have sought the help and looked inside and started to ask the questions and go deeper. I could have ended up just part of the same system. So it's like, I don't know, it's finding the gift in it.
Finding
the
gift.
Anything, but
M. Scott Peck, in his book, People of the Lie, he talks about, I think it was in that book, he talks about curse by design. And everyone who chooses to use their curses, their pains, their traumas, their wounds as a way, like a portal into wisdom, I admire very much, because now they're not victim, they're trying to observe themselves, they're pulling out of the system, and they have much to say and much to teach. So, you know, it sounds like you're following that pathway, and I'm reminding you and the audience that just because our parents or your parents or whoever's parents had injuries that created this defense mechanism of apathy, the narcissistic defense of basically numbing out, cutting your heart out, it doesn't mean that the world is like that. So we have to be careful not to project that on other people. And also we have to be careful not to enter relationships that replicate our family of origin, because then we're going to just be stuck in this loophole of over and over what the Freudland repeated injuries that people, if they're lucky, they get out of, because these toxic bonds are very, very they trap you. They really suck you in. And particularly because there's always some sort of a positive reinforcement. And just like in Vegas, you know, if you lose a lot of money and you have a lot of negatives, but yet you win one round, wow, you know, that positive reinforcement is going to really, really increase your addiction, so to speak. So we have to be careful with the Freuds.
They become like an oasis in the desert, right?
Yes.
Because you're so desperate for any sort of positive reflection back upon you that when it comes as a crumb, it's you can forget everything. You're so thirsty for it. And that was actually my question is, so I entered into a relationship for a marriage.
Okay.
With all of the red flags, but I was deep in my mental illness when I entered. I have gone through 12 years of this, and I wonder, when you picked a partner that fits the exact role that you need to keep receiving the same treatment that you receive, that to keep reinforcing it, even though it's unconscious and you don't want it and it's painful, you keep reinforcing it through this relationship.
Right.
Is it possible that the other partner can change with you?
Well,
as you go
usually,
through your painful change? Is it possible? Have you ever seen it?
I have seen breakdown, breakthrough. I've seen breakdown, breakthrough, where people have come to a point, like the point of it just can't go on like this anymore. And whenever someone drags their significant other in for treatment and says, fix him, my approach is always you have to go to the childhood wounds and repair the self before you can repair the relationship. So step number one with helping the narcissistic person who's numbed out and shut down and defended against love and connection is always to go to the childhood pain of when that shutdown started and develop a connection to the self. Because you can't really connect with your partner when you haven't yet repaired that, call it inner child, if you will. Okay, so I think a lot of therapies take the wrong approach. They're doing marital therapy, communication skills, and all kinds of things. But I think the real deal is to repair the mother-infant disconnect in the person who's gone apathetic, who's numbed out, before you start repairing the marriage. And that's why with couples therapy, I always include individual therapy. And you reminded me of an episode that I did called Molecules of Love. You're hungry for it, you're in the desert, and somebody love bombs you, and wow, you get 2 molecules of love. And those 2 molecules are supposed to take you on a long, fulfilling ride. I'm being facetious, of course. And then,
right.
and like I say in my book, and by the way, if you haven't grabbed a copy already, the PDF is free, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. Okay, so get that copy. And also, if you want to learn the mind map without much reading and just be part of the process of a video lecture, I created a mind map video series, which is still available, and you can buy that and you can download it via a Vimeo and watch it and learn the aspects. And then hopefully in 3 months I'll have my video that I'm creating, and I'll be, of course, hosting Healing from Narcissistic Abuse. And really the topic that I'm on in this video is exactly this topic. It's healing from the abuse of apathy. That's just so painful to think that the person that is your mother, your father, or your primary just doesn't know how to give a damn, just doesn't have feelings. I commend you for your journey, and you seem to ask a lot of great questions, and just keep asking these questions and things will unfold. And some of us are lucky enough to have loving, warm parents that do care, and some of us are not fortunate enough to have that. And if you're not fortunate enough to have that, then understand that just because your parents were that way, it doesn't make everybody on the planet apathetic and narcissistic and emotionally unavailable. However, if you were raised that way, do the work so that you don't go back into this low bar relationship that was set at your, at that level from your childhood. Okay?
Yes. Thanks, Dr. Judy. I have to tell you, I've been listening to you for years.
Oh my God.
And you've been really,
thanks.
Yeah, I've called in many times, but I was going through some brain injuries and recovering from that. And so I took some time off, but you've really been foundational for me in this process. And though I haven't had a chance to personally work with you, reading your PDF and listening to your videos and your live shows are always really, really helpful. And I think what you're doing is so important because not only are you helping us, but you're really focused on helping children who are in the experience cope with it and be better at that point. Because if you can get to the children while you're having the experience and help the child be okay with it, right?
You know, first of all, thank you for your your kind acknowledgement. It does mean a lot to me because I you know, there's nothing that I love more than making a difference to other people and making a difference to the next generation. And if there's anybody out there that has connections to private schools or public schools, I would just love to get the mind map into the school system so that children and parents can learn about wounds and how to prevent them. And then I can teach everybody to be brilliant like Einstein, who says smart people solve problems and geniuses prevent them. So I want to be on the preventative end of things. So thank you so much for calling in. And
right on, Dr. Judy. Thank you very much.
Okay, take care.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Good night. Okay, any other thoughts or calls? Or I can't even see what time it is.
We have about 15 minutes.
616?
Yeah.
6. Oh, that's a long time. That's an eternity right here. So I invite you to call in. And this is a very, very tough topic because, you know, in a sense, if you, let's say your parent yells at you, okay, that doesn't mean they're narcissistic. It doesn't mean that they don't care. It might mean that they're, you know, their parenting skills are not the very best. It may mean that they're losing it, but it doesn't absolutely mean that they lack empathy. It's just that you can qualitatively tell when the lights are on but no one's home, and this false self thing that keeps jumping out at you, fooling you into thinking that you have a mother that cares or a father that cares, because now they're in the public eye and all eyes are on them and they're smiling at you and talking to the other moms and dads and telling them what great times you're having at home and how you're planning the next party or the next event. And so it is very confusing because it sounds right, it looks right, they're being smiled at by the other parents and they're given green lights all the way. However, there's something wrong with the picture, because as soon as you go home, that behavior stops. Okay? Why does it stop? Because it no longer serves them to look good. Because as we know from the many discussions and readings about narcissists, they like to look good and sound good, and they like to do that in the public eye. But once the spotlight is off of them and they resort back to their fake self or the empty shell of the people that they are, because they never developed, it's a different experience, and it's very confusing. Just like Bob said, and just like Barry said, it's very, very confusing, because consistency is a great blessing. You know that you're going to wake up and the person's going to smile at you or love you or maybe even be in a bad mood. But there's a concept in psychology called object constancy. And on some level, we want to know that things are going to be somewhat consistent. Maybe mom's in a bad mood or dad's not exactly attentive, or maybe both of them have gone away on a trip. But object constancy allows us to know that they will be back emotionally, physically, that they'll somewhere, somehow be available. And when they're not, it's scary. Okay, it's scary. So most of you already know that narcissistic parents can cause a lot of family trouble. They gaslight people. They might pick one child, maybe the most compliant child, to be the golden one. They might scapegoat another one. If you haven't already seen my YouTube episodes on sibling rivalry, parents as the cause, please watch it, because we're talking about a system gone wrong, and this system gone wrong has ramifications in so many areas. So siblings will suffer, and cousins will be disconnected, and envy will play a hand in this attention-seeking kind of a battle for being in the spotlight. And so, again, going back to the mind map, if something's not built correctly, if it's not sustainable, it will fall apart, okay? So you can't really fake it till you make it. You could fake it till you make it for a little while, but then the gig is up. And when the gig is up, you've got chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And then people reinfect and find another relationship that is similar in dynamics, whether it be a boss, whether it be a lover or a husband or a friend or anyone, and then they'll go on the same WTF ride. And it's a mess and it's wearing, and people never really seem to get to panel number 789, which is the healing part of the process, synergy, and then healing, and then some sort of a unity, right? So some kind of a balance. So the shift never happens because people just keep reinfecting themselves. So again, as many of you know, we do Zoom therapy, we do in-person therapy. We have a beautiful staff of people who have learned the mind map and are very well versed on taking you through this journey from the wounds of childhood, through dismantling them, to paradigm shifting out. I have been blogging, so look on my website and you will see under blogs different topics. Hopefully my blog on apathy will be done and up in the next day or so. Also, because of the Jeffrey Dahmer stories and Netflix out there, I was asked to mind map Jeffrey Dahmer. So there's an article on him by me, and I mind mapped him. And love to hear your comments about it. It's up on the blog. And if you like, write me. And if you want to have me shrink the movie Jeffrey Dahmer, I'm happy to. I think it's fascinating. And so you could see what happens when people cross the line from apathy to sociopathy to psychopathy, okay? So how do you end up murdering people and disassociating from the effects of such heinous crimes on another human being? So you see that this is on a continuum, okay? So from some level of apathy all the way to psychopathy. And so there's not just like one category. This is a continuum. And so if you're suffering from someone who is apathetic, if you feel that you've shut your heart down and you've gone cold on human beings, please seek help. And the mind map is a way of addressing these wounds that then turn into horrible core beliefs and nasty defense mechanisms that keep you separated from other people. And please do not hesitate to write me and connect and receive a consultation. I'm happy to pick a therapist from the team for you, and I'm happy to work with you myself if that is a something that you'd like to do. And so I'll be back next week, and really glad to be back live on my own YouTube show. So thank you, callers, for calling in and writing in. Good night, everyone.